Well, hello everybody and welcome. I'm Lisa Harker, Director of the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory, and welcome to the second in our In Conversation series, where we bring you leading thinkers, experts, practitioners, and those with lived experience of the family courts for frank discussions on a variety of themes related to children and families in the family justice system. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Stephanie Boyce, President of the Law Society of England and Wales. Stephanie made history last year when she became the first Black and only sixth female President of the Law Society, the professional body for solicitors. She is an advocate for women in leadership, representing the Women Lawyers Division as a council member of the Law Society, and a member of the Thomson Reuters Transforming Women's Leadership in the Law Advisory Board. She was also recently appointed to a commission established by the Treasury and the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which aims to boost the socio-economic diversity at senior levels of financial and professional services. And in 2021, and again this year, Stephanie has made the Power List 100 most influential Black people in the UK. The Law Society represents around 200,000 solicitors working across all areas of law. But today we're keen to discuss what Stephanie thinks are some of the challenges facing the family court and those working with families in and around it. We want to explore how we can improve the experiences and outcomes for children and families, which is the central aim of the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory. But before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about the format of today's event. There are lots of you attending, and while we won't be able to see you during the event, we do want to hear from you. So please share your questions for Stephanie in the chat tab. Thank you also to everyone who sent their questions in advance. We will try and address as many of your questions as we can. But rest assured, all the comments and the questions will be read by the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory team, and this helps to shape future research and events. We are recording today's event, and it will be available via our website if you'd like to revisit the discussion. But without further ado, I'd like to say welcome to Stephanie, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for inviting me, and to the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory for inviting me to speak.
So let's go straight to our first question. And I'd like to start by asking you about what's involved with being the President of the Law Society. You're the 177th President. So what is being the President involved? What's involved in that role? And over the past year, what has been your focus?
Oh, absolutely. So being President, so quite right, I'm the 177th, the sixth female, the first Black office holder and the first person of colour to become President of the Law Society in its almost 200-year history. And can I say, I'm never tired from saying that. It still takes my breath away to note that after four attempts, I was successfully elected as Deputy Vice President in 2019. And once you're successfully elected as Deputy Vice President, you then move on to automatically to Vice President, to President, as I became in March 2021. So, and I will serve an extended term. So ordinarily our term is for 12 months, but I will serve a total of 19 months. So I've just got over 3 months left to go. So what have I achieved? Firstly, let me say the Law Society is the independent professional body for solicitors in England and Wales. I lead some 200 or 215,000 solicitors in England and Wales, and we, the Law Society, are run by and for our members. Our role is to be the voice of solicitors, to drive excellence in the profession and to safeguard the rule of law. And of course, we do this by seeking to influence legislative and regulatory environments in the public interest. At home, we promote the profession and the vital role that lawyers play in our economy. We contribute some £60 billion in GDP P towards the towards exports. The legal services employs some 552,000 employees in legal services. But what have I achieved? What have I done in the last year? What is the role of the president? The role of the president is to be the voice, as I say, to represent that some 215,000 solicitors in England and Wales. And we are a diverse body in terms of where we practice geographically, what type of law we practice, whether we're in-house, whether we're in private practice, whether we're sole practititioners, and so forth. We're found everywhere, in government, in organisations, charities, and so forth. We're everywhere. So it's an ambassadorial role. You are, as I say, the face of the profession. So when I took up this role, I said that I wanted to leave the profession. My mission was to leave the profession more diverse and inclusive than the one I entered, and absolutely clear that it was that my ambition to leave the profession was to be a shared ambition with each and every one of us playing our part. You know, solicitors are the beating heart of society, and we must reflect the society we are serving.
Thank you. Thanks for that opening explanation about the role. Let's pick up this issue about diversity. In terms of the diversity of the professions in and around the family court, there continues to be an underrepresentation of Black and other minoritized ethnic groups, particularly at the most senior levels. How do you think this impacts on the perception and delivery of fair and equal justice, and what should we be doing about it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, underrepresentation is a serious challenge facing our justice system, and that's whether it's among professions or the judiciary, or in fact the jurors, given an issue that was raised recently. It is also a self-reinforcing issue, in as much that without diverse solicitors and barristers entering the judiciary, we will never see greater representation among judges in the criminal or family courts. And so, as I said about my priority about leaving the profession in a better shape than I found it, more diverse, more inclusive than the one I entered. And of course, as president, I have used, and not just as president, as an office holder, and even before that, as a council member, I have used every tool at my disposal to achieve this, such as challenging and speaking about the benefits of diversity on panels and in speeches, as well as encouraging and supporting workplaces to improve representation at all levels of their organisation. And of course, we, the Law Society, have a responsibility too to help achieve this, such as through our Diversity Access Scheme. And that's a scheme that is a scholarship run annually by the Law Society for the last 10 years that has to identify exceptional students, some 200 students who have a strong ambition to qualify as a solicitor, but who otherwise without support will almost certainly not be able to realise that ambition. And of course, our Social Mobility Ambassadors programme, which was launched in 2015, to promote diversity in the profession by putting a spotlight on those who come from a less advantaged background, who are now role model solicitors, and talk about their journeys, going into schools, workplaces, and so forth. And of course, through the Law Society's own efforts to improve diversity amongst the judiciary, I have been quite outspoken in my comments around the lack of diversity in the judiciary. And of course, we will address underrepresentation and avoid the perception that our justice system is not fair when we truly have a diverse judiciary, a diverse profession, and not just at the junior levels, but at the senior levels also. Because I'm acutely aware that 9% of our judges are from an Asian, Black, or another ethnic minority background. And this proportion is lower at the High Court and above, where it is only 4%. So when a victim, when a witness, a defendant, or a lawyer looks at to our justice system and judges and practitioners that reside within it, they should see fairness, they should see objectivity and independence at its heart. And if that system does not represent the society it serves, these principles will come into play and question. And the public can put, the trust that the public will put into the rule of law and so forth may erode if they do not see that diversity, that fairness, that perception, that trust, that confidence.
Thank you. More generally, what do you think we should be doing to try to improve children and families' experience of family proceedings? I mean, how can we help the family court to become a more inclusive and welcoming place for children and families?
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the greatest challenges in our family courts currently is the large backlog and the delays that families are experiencing. I think this week there were some statistics published, and just over 68,000 cases backlogged in the family courts. And of course, this takes a toll on everyone, but especially children. So on average, cases took 49 weeks in January to March 2022, and that is up 6 weeks compared to the same quarter last year. It also appears that the situation will not be resolved quickly. HMCTS has previously estimated that it would take 3 years to return to pre-pandemic levels. So this will no doubt cause concern for the many children and families involved. And to resolve this, the government must ensure that there are enough fee-paid and full-time judges to deal with the existing caseload, and to make sure we do not find ourselves in this situation again. Secondly, we need to ensure that representation from solicitors is available to those going through the family courts. And in many instances, the early involvement of a solicitor who can provide legal advice so that their client fully understands their options that are available to them, like mediation. It also ensures that only cases that need to go to court do. So legal aid for early advice should be restored as soon as possible to enable this. And these are just 2 steps that addressing the backlog and restoring legal aid for early advice would vastly improve the experience of children and families in the system.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you a bit about how solicitors work with families and the way that they work in the family court settings, particularly around private law, because as you know, about twice as many private law applications come in each year than public law applications. And a proportion of these cases are very protracted. The evidence tells us that these are very vulnerable parents with a lot of needs who get caught up in what is essentially an adversarial system. So I wondered about how solicitors can better support parents with their vulnerabilities to resolve their difficulties in the interests of their children.
So if we want parents to avoid protracted court proceedings, we need them to have a good grasp of the legal options that are available to them. And our court system can be bewildering for those who have no experience of it, and being in the midst of a stressful dispute is perhaps the worst time to try and understand it. And of course, we need to see greater involvement of solicitors in the process. Solicitors can guide parents through their options, explaining what's in the best route to resolve the issue, what's in their best interests of the family and children of those involved, better signpost options like mediation that I've spoken about before, and of course legal aid that I've spoken about before. But public legal education plays a role here. And I've long been an advocate of teaching law in schools at an earlier age, teaching law as soon as students are able to understand it, students who then grow up into adults, because giving the public a better grasp of how our courts work, what options of legal redress exist, and how these often do not involve protracted legal cases would be, in my mind, invaluable. And as I say, this should start at the earliest stage possible, and that's with legal education being taught in schools.
Thank you. We've talked a lot about parents and professionals, but let's talk a bit about children in the process, particularly well, in both public and private law proceedings. But do you think we're listening to the voice of the children sufficiently in that process?
I mean, I would hope so. I mean, you know, I'm not a family law practitioner, so I can't speak from experience, but I would hope that the children's voice is being heard in this process. And I know we've got various mechanisms, roles built into the process to see and ensure that the child's voice is heard. But whatever those mechanisms are, we have a backlog of cases in, as I say, the family courts, and over 68,000, according to the statistics published, I believe, this week or recently. That is going to have an effect on those, including the children, caught up in the system. And so more must be done to ensure that the backlogs are cleared you know, in an efficient, effective manner, and signposting, as I say, to alternatives other than to courts is a good route to start in. But we must ensure that the child's voice is heard, and far too often the children's voice can get lost in this process. So we must ensure that the children are remembered throughout this.
Yeah, we've recently published some research showing the extent to which children themselves do not feel sufficiently listened to, particularly in private law proceedings. So it's something certainly we want to continue to focus on. I wanted to come back to this issue about the need for resources. You clearly talked about the need for more judges to deal with the backlog, the need to restore some legal advice. We're in a context where we can see the need for more funding for the family court, for the professionals involved, and most crucially to support children and parents at an earlier stage. But we're also realistically in a context where those resources are unlikely to be forthcoming at the level we would wish in the next few years. So I suppose pragmatically, where should we focus our energies, given that we won't give up on calling for those resources, but we don't want to let the children who are currently in the system down? Where should we put our energies?
Sorry, somebody's trying to get my attention. You can imagine perhaps that there's lots going on at the moment, and I don't know, they've gone away for the moment, but that's twice now. They've tried to get my attention, so forgive me. So I think, the Law Society has been making a clear case for investment in our justice system at every opportunity. As I said, we've been speaking directly to ministers and MPs about getting the resources the system needs. Our justice system has suffered from a lack of investment. It has, through successive governments, it's continued to be underinvested in. We have had some success with the government putting in over £2 billion into the system at the last spending review. And while it will take time to train more judges, starting today is better than tomorrow, and we will continue to push the argument as to why that capacity is absolutely needed. In addition to this, a review of every aspect of family justice would be welcome. And the Law Society has called for a broad review of civil legal aid, and this should include family too. And that way we can understand what the demands are on the system, what resources are needed, and how we can work in the most effective way possible to give families and children the support that they really need.
Thank you. Let me pick up one of the questions that's come through the chat. So the family courts are often described as secret courts and compared to other jurisdictions, in that they haven't been open to the same level of transparency as other courts. The current president of the Family Division has announced his intention to pursue an agenda of transparency and to try to invite the media and others in to see proceedings. What's your view about that, and how we balance the need for greater understanding about what happens in the family courts with the need to protect the confidentiality of children?
I mean, absolutely. Transparency is absolutely most welcome, even though I would like to think that we had transparency before this suggestion, this proposal. I think that, you know, those involved should be consulted as to whether, you know, they should give consent as to whether or not that they are comfortable with inviting the cameras in. But this goes back to the point that I was making around public legal education. Having the public understand about our justice system, about our laws, because after all, legal rights mean absolutely nothing if people don't know what those rights are, and they don't even know when those rights have been taken away. So I'm a big advocate of public legal education because it is absolutely too late to learn about that, to learn about the justice system, learn about our rights, learn about the workings of the court when we're caught up in it. So we should be learning about it before. But in terms of openness of the courtrooms, that should be done in the best interest of all parties. And in my view, that starts with consent.
Thank you. Another question that's come in, it relates to training of solicitors. So where are your priorities in terms of the development of training for solicitors? And in particular, given we've been talking about how to ensure that children and families feel welcome and are able to engage in proceedings, is that an element of training about how to properly engage with families, how to use motivational interview techniques and those sorts of techniques?
Well, depending on what element of training is being thought of, because obviously the Solicitors Regulation Authority is responsible for training and qualification. There are other courses, top-up courses if you like, that solicitors can take in terms of communication, in terms of other courses that they can take in order to ensure that they are fully communicating and connected with their clients. Each case is going to be different. Every solicitor will have a different approach in terms of the way they interact with their clients, as to the details of the case before them. What's important is that we are listening to what our clients are telling us and what our clients are not telling us, and how that may impact on the outcomes in terms of the outcome from the courts and how their expectations are managed with that. So of course, not a straightforward answer, because as I say, every case is different, and everybody's experience of the system is going to be different, and how everyone approaches that.
Thank you. I mean, I can see questions coming in on the chat about, should the family court be an adversarial system? And there is one unique aspect of the family court is just how many other professionals from outside the legal world are involved. So if you're working on a child protection case, you're going to be obviously working with social workers, but possibly you have come into contact with hospitals, medical advisors, many different professionals from around the system. And I wondered, in terms of the Law Society, whether this is some aspect of the work of the Law Society as well, to think beyond the boundaries of lawyers, to engage with other professional groups on areas of common interest. Is that something the Law Society is already pursuing?
Well, absolutely. We have a children law committee. We have a that deals with all the things, aspects around children law and some of the things that we've already discussed. And of course, as I spoke about before, seeking to influence some of that legislative and regulatory rules that exist around the courts, the family court system. And of course, we've spoken about civil justice. But this is about people's, and I saw a comment somewhere, I seem to have lost it, but it spoke about more and more, we're seeing litigants in person, people who do not qualify for legal aid, people who are finding themselves unrepresented in courts. There is, most people, I suspect, would have heard our comments around legal aid. And the Law Society has just published a map around legal aid deserts. Legal aid funding has been cut significantly in criminal and civil over the years. The government had committed to reviewing civil legal aid, because it's just done the criminal legal aid review. It has committed to doing a review of civil legal aid. We do not have a date for that. And it's unlikely that we're going to get a date for that before the summer recess. But there are issues, real issues, as I spoke about before, with our justice system that includes the family courts, and what's needed across the board, across the infrastructure, the whole ecosystem of the justice system, the courts, judges, court staff, practitioners who work in it, is investment. Is investment, continuous investment, year on year, investment in our buildings, in our people, those who work in the system, and those who uphold the system.
Thank you. Let me ask you about the role that research and data can play, because this is where the observatory comes in. Our role is to bring research and data to those who work in the family justice system. The Law Society has a long tradition of undertaking research itself and supporting research. But what's your view on the sort of state of research in this field? Do we have enough information to help make really good decisions about the future of the justice system?
Well, data drives change. We know that data drives change, but you've got to do something with that data. You've got to do something with the research. We know, as I spoke about before, that the justice system is, in all its guises, has not been invested in properly, sufficiently, sustainably for a number of years. And so I think, some of it is quite evident in as much what needs to happen. We need more judges. We need more practitioners. We need those who come before the court system, that they should be represented. They shouldn't have to come up against the court system, the justice system, with no legal training whatsoever, in a position that they are found defending themselves. So we can continue to do that research, because absolutely data drives change, but we've got to do something with that research. Government needs to act upon what that research, what that data is telling them, and do something tangible and measurable with that data, so that people feel that they're getting real outcomes when they get caught up in the system, not waiting 3+ years or 49 weeks or whatever it is to see outcomes, where, when their life, their situation needs to be dealt with, or their concern to be addressed immediately.
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to ask you one more question before we wrap up. I want to know what one change you would like to see. What would you prioritise in terms of family courts? I suppose it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on what would you advise your successor to do in this space. What would be your priority?
Well, my priority is around, as I say, it's around access to justice, because you may have an issue in the family courts, but that could also feed into other parts of the justice system. So you may, in terms of, children, it may lead on to health issues, housing issues, and so forth. All of those things feed into it. But if you don't have access to justice, and that's proper access to justice, whether that's access to legal aid, access to a legal advisor, and so forth. And going back to the point that I made around legal rights and not knowing what those are, the London Legal Walk Trust has done some research, and 2/3 of the UK population do not know where to go to if they have a legal issue. There is a greater proportion who don't even know, do not recognise when they have a legal issue. And continuing on from the London Legal Walk Trust, that some 15 million people, of those 2/3 of the population, even if they did know where to go to, they couldn't afford the advice anyway, because they're living below the poverty line. We have some real issues going on in terms of accessibility. Our justice system should be the preserve of the many, not the few. It shouldn't be, access to justice should not be predicated on those on the backs of the wealthy. It should be for those who need it, and who need advice, and should be able to access it at any time. So I've given a very overall holistic view, but as I say, there are a number of things that emerge from just not only the family courts that have a domino effect. We need sustainable, long-term, continuous, sustainable investment in our justice system, or otherwise people will start to lose trust. They will start to lose confidence in the courts as we know it.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for taking part in today's conversation, and thank you all for attending today's event. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. If you'd like to find out more about the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory's work, then please visit our website, which is nuffieldfjo.org.uk, and you can be kept informed of upcoming research and events by signing up to our regular bulletins at nuffieldfjo.org.uk/subscribe. We would be really grateful if you could fill out the event feedback form, which I think has been put in the chat, as we always take the answers to those and look and shape our future events on the back of them. So please fill in that form, and we look forward to welcoming you all to future events. Thank you very much.